Hello engineers, welcome to this extremely exciting behind the scenes interview with Marek Rosa. VS2 is on the horizon. Planets and survival foundations. Very, very exciting times, ain't they, Marek?
Yes.
So to begin this off, let's summarise what VS2 is all about. What is VS2 to you? What's the idea behind it?
Yeah. So basically, it's the first time when we are adding gameplay to Space Engineers 2. That's the main thing, and it's also a moment where we can define what does it mean. So that's what the first time when we are releasing colonization, meta loop, and backpack building and projection building.
Okay. So now a question that a lot of the community members out there is, how does VS2 redefine Space Engineers compared to the first game? So how is it different? What's the take on planets, colonization, survival that makes it better than the first game?
So that's that. There will be a meta loop that drives you forward. Something that you have specific objectives, specific criteria how you can say that if you are progressing or not. You can see it on the map because you can see how you are colonizing one sector at a time or how colonized the sectors are. The other thing that is redefining Space Engineers is focus on more mainstream appeal. And I want to clarify here that it's not about dumbing down the game or making it, like simpler or dumber and so on. No, we actually maybe even are increasing the complexity. I mean, the new unified grid system definitely more complex than what we had before, but we want to put it into a layer or some wrapper of accessibility so that it's more accessible to more players from the beginning, and you don't have these like long, many hour periods of onboarding where you are lost and you don't know how to play the game, and then when you learn, it's fun, but first few hours are struggling, or many people are struggling. So to summarize this, it's the colonization, and it's our priority to make the game more mainstream. So, and that's what we are doing in VS2. That's what the main thing that we are focusing on in VS2.
Okay, so very exciting times. We want to get new players into the game, and we want to get them into the game easily and quickly. So moving forward, we want to talk about the Almagist star system. And the first question that I want to ask you is, what makes the Almagist star system ideal for Space Engineers 2?
Yeah, so as a first thing, we really wanted to have a star system that has a map, actual locations for planets, for asteroid fields, and mission objectives, and so on. And then, because Almagist is a two-star system or binary system, so there is a Delphos, which is in the center. It's a star, or like a big star that is not casting any light, and then there is Almagist that is actually orbiting around this and creating the sense of day and night, and it's orbiting very fast, so it can actually do some day-night cycles. And again, now I will speak a little bit like the guy behind the game, so like why this specific configuration and design. So the thing is that we wanted players to experience day and night cycles when they are on the planet, and but we don't want to do orbital mechanics yet, because we want to keep that for later. One of the reasons is that it will make the game more complicated, like for traveling, for navigation and everything, and we just don't want to deal with it right now, and also we don't want players, so we are putting orbital mechanics on later. But we still wanted this day-night cycle, so this is why we created that kind of solar system.
Well, you're going to make a lot of players very excited by talking about orbital mechanics, because it's something that they have requested. So it's nice to hear that is being looked into for perhaps the future. But you mentioned Delphos then, and in the blog post it says it's calm for now. So what does it mean by calm for now? Are we expecting some big changes from it in the future?
Well, hard to say, but it will be more dangerous area, or close to Delphos, it will be more dangerous area. I mean, Delphos, the actual Delphos will be an area that would kill you.
Okay, you heard that.
Players will actually see this in the roadmap. I think it will be there.
Because we saw it in the roadmap. It said a Delphos killing field, and the players got a bit confused and excited of what is a killing field. So an area that they're not going to be able to survive in if they get too close.
Yes. If you get too close, basically the radiation will kill you. It will also damage your grids and so on. So there will be more dangers, in the sectors surrounding Delphos.
So what's going to happen to the map as we expand and add more sectors in?
So in future vertical slices we'll be adding sectors, or kind of like they are already there, they're just not accessible or hardly accessible without the travel lanes. So we'll be expanding it. By the way, I also think it's possible that we will redesign the sectors that already will be available in VS2. So for example, when we will release water, I think we'll have to change even the first time user experience, the FTUE, so that it leads through some water mission or some water experiences.
So we're going to move on to talk about Verger, our Earth-like planet, and we want to know what inspired Verger's lush sort of landscape and foliage.
Yeah, so one thing is that, and players will find out this later, is that the flora, the trees and the grasses on Verger, they resemble the Earth flora. And there is a reason for this. Even though it's 10,000 years away from, 10,000 light years away from Earth, this will be the mystery that the players will have to solve. And so that was the premise for us. And now the question was like artistically, what kind of flora we want to have on the planet. So of course we thought about what kind of biomes there are, and we took inspiration from many Earth plants. We just changed them a little bit, as if the evolution was running on them for a couple of let's say centuries or thousands of years, independently from Earth. And we put them there, and many of the plants that you will see in the game are actually inspired by the real plants that me or somebody else saw somewhere, when like hiking and so on. So many times, for example, when I was in South Africa or somewhere in Africa, I sent a photo to the artist, or I remember that some photos I sent even from the botanical garden from Rome, or actually botanical garden here in Prague, which is quite big one and very nice. And so when I was traveling somewhere and I saw some plant that looked strange, because it's funny that some plants, they look alien, even though they're actually here on the Earth. But because you are not used to that kind of flora, if you are living in Europe, then they surprise you. So we have all kinds of things. And actually, what you will see in VS2 is not the final set of flora that we have. Like, we want to make it much more versatile.
The players have already seen it, and the flora detailing, they're already really excited about it. YouTubers have seen and zoomed right into the detailing on these trees, and they're fantastic. Now, you mentioned a little bit about plants and other things resembling real-world locations and whatnot, but that's what I wanted to ask you about next. We've actually picked some real-world locations to put in the game, and I want to hear a little bit about why take this approach, why add these real locations in, like the Grand Canyon, for instance, and the mountains that you've, I believe you travelled in Africa when you visited.
Yeah, Table Mountain, of course, from Cape Town. Then there is Cederberg. Then actually even from the city where I was born, Bratislava. Oh. I think nobody would recognize it because you need to change the scales and everything, and then suddenly it's not so easy to recognize it, but the shape and the pattern is there. The same for Table Mountain. I think Table Mountain is probably easier to recognize. And why we did this? Of course, we didn't want to overdo it, because you also want to have what some people call like magic circle. So the fantasy world that you are creating must be, working by its own and not influenced by things from the outside, because then you are breaking the magic circle. And so we also need to be careful. But I like these places, and somehow it just feels nice to bring them with me to the game. And there is also Madeira, island that's there, because we visited it, and after I returned, I sent email to the artist that please also do Madeira.
Because this leads a little bit into the procedural generation of planets as well. So at the current moment in time, the planets aren't procedurally generated. If someone could generate one of the planets and place it, they would have the same planet, wouldn't they? Or not?
They are procedurally generated at the beginning, but then handcrafted by the artist.
Okay.
So, and it's actually a mix of those, because if you think about, I would actually say that they are handcrafted with some help of, some automation tools. Yeah. Because the surface area of the planet is so big that if you have to do it 1 meter at a time, you would be doing it forever. So we have to get some help, but it's the other way. It's that first, it's the artist designing the main shapes and locations and so on, and then some tool can generate little details. But we definitely wanted to avoid planets that look like just some procedurally generated fractals. Like we didn't want this, because there are some games that they can say that they have billions, trillions of planets or whatnot, but they all look the same, or like you see the pattern very, very, very easily. And we definitely didn't want this. We want it to look like a real place. And if you want to do real place, you actually, I don't think there are procedural tools that can help you to do this well, because, there will be in the future, but not now, because the actual terrain is formed through erosion and many other geological processes over years. You cannot replicate this simply with like one fractal equation.
Now, so my final question about Verger is, when water arrives, what's going to happen to the planet? How will it transform? Is it going to be quite straightforward, and the water will just spawn onto the planet and cover the areas that we can see clearly where water belongs, or will there be another addition to the planet, for instance?
So what you just said, basically the areas that people already can see that probably water will be here. So there will be water, because we have the water level, like the ocean water level defined. So that's already done. Maybe we will need to do some tweaking and some fixes probably, but then we also need to add sources of flowing water for rivers, and we need to do rivers, and maybe some water dams, and maybe underwater, like under terrain, or under surface kind of rivers and so on. So that's something that we'll be doing when we will be finishing the water implementation. So the planet will not change that much. We'll just like let the water in, but we also need to add some more special places, like I said, like rivers or lakes, and maybe some water dams and places like that.
There's still a lot of work to do with underwater, because we've been previewing some of the underwater like plantation and flora as well, and how it reacts to the water and it's moving, and the lighting underneath there as well. So there's going to be a whole other world to explore when that gets introduced in a later slice. So now we're going to take a look at Chemik. Now Chemik is a completely different planet with a total hostile environment compared to Verger's. So let's discuss it. So what sort of emotion or feelings did you want the player to have when they arrived at Chemik?
Yeah, so Chemik was inspired by Mars-like planet, so it should be more hostile, more barren, not so friendly for life. And on the other hand, there will be also some rewards for the player in the form of some materials or ore that you can find only there. So that's that. And I think the challenges that you will meet on Chemik will actually evolve in the future updates. That right now it's just planet, there is not that much happening besides some contracts or some encounters, but in the future there will be NPCs and there will be some threats which will make it more hostile environment.
And what we wanted to mention before as well is that it's just the foundation, isn't it, these planets? So we'll start here, and as you explained before, and you go into a little bit more detail, as we add more planets, we're going to revisit these.
Yes, exactly. I think with every step we'll be always looking a little bit back and polishing, because if you add water, you also need to look on how it impacts everything you have done so far. If you have NPCs, you also need to go back and look on how it impacts everything. And this goes for everything else, like colonization system and weapons, combat, and so on.
And that's why it's always key as well to have your feedback, guys, because as you play on these planets and you attempt to survive, and you try and survive in both planets, for instance, one's going to be a lot harsher than another. Once you've completed that introductory sort of sequence, and then you've ventured out into space and then arrived at Chemik, we'll see what it's really like to survive there, and then we'll be listening to your feedback and adjusting these planets accordingly. Right, moving on from the planets then, let's talk about the survival foundations. What is survival foundations in a little bit of a nutshell? What does it mean in sort of simple terms?
So backpack building, projection building, and of course the survival itself, that you have health and you can die and so on. But I would also actually add even the colonization as part of the survival experience, basically tying it up together in some meta loop, that you can be not just surviving, but you're actually colonizing, one sector at a time. and you can see the progress there. But back to backpack building and projection building. So the reason why we first considered going in this direction was to make the game more mainstream. And I'm actually doing this even for myself, because as a player or gamer, I like games that are very easy to understand in like few minutes, and not a game that you need to play for 3 hours to start enjoying it, but actually need to start enjoying it in few minutes. Otherwise, I'm very more likely to quit it and never return.
Because we know there's a lot of players out there who jump into the game and they do find, especially Space Engineers 1, a little bit too daunting, and that causes them to jump out. And what we're really trying to do here is give them, a gentle introduction, but at the same time keep it exciting. And then also we want to keep the level, don't we, where we're going to keep the more advanced players entertained. So it's quite a difficult sort of balance. Maybe that's what you could explain for us a little bit in detail about how backpack building still keeps the advanced features, but also introduces, more gentle to them new players.
I will also add one thing, is that over last 12 years, basically, when I was speaking with people about Space Engineers, so there are two types of people. People who play and like Space Engineers, and then there is a group of people who will say like, the game really looks interesting, it's just too complicated for me or too hard to get into, and so on. And I belong to this group, because I'm exactly that kind of player who wants it simple, enjoy it, and then maybe later get more advanced things. But on some curve, that actually feels where there is good balance between the obstacles and like how hard is to learn the game versus the reward that the game is giving me. And how backpack building and projection will help. So backpack building means that you can start crafting or welding directly from the ore that you harvest or that you drill. That you don't need to go through a stage where you need to build some assembler or raffinery and get the ingots and components and so on. So basically it means almost like in Minecraft, you just like dig something and build with it. You don't need this complicated stage. And what it means is that it's like mentally less draining, I would say, because instead of I just like mine some iron and now I'm welding something, if you imagine like, okay, now I mine some iron, okay, so like what ingots, what components, and the game will tell me like I need 5 components of sometimes I don't even remember those things, them like I will forget it like on the way where I go getting the iron. So we wanted to reduce this. But what is important is that it's just one part of the game, and later you will need to build smelter and assembler and all these other blocks with some progression where you will need to create or manufacture, basically get the more advanced components. So it's just simplifying the start of the game, but the later stages still will be complex for players who are enjoying that or actually got to that stage.
So you've answered pretty much all the questions we had about survival foundations in that answer there, but the other thing that I wanted to talk about is how do you feel survival will evolve in future updates? Will it keep this, of course, as a foundation, and then how would that evolve from what we've put in to start with here in VS2?
So for me, it's mainly about the proper colonization system. So actually, even what we will have in VS2 is not, in my opinion, the final stage of colonization. And we are just working on like the next stage, designing it. And I think it will change slightly. So in VS2, the colonization is basically about some percentage progress of a sector, how much colonized it is, and that's it. But I think it should be a little bit more intuitive and also, let's say, rewarding. So maybe there will be some stages of colonization of a sector. And we also need to answer a question like what happens with colonization in multiplayer, is everybody having his own colonization progress, or is there one shared, and so on. So we need to have really good answers for this. So, and that will be the priority for us for VS 2.2 and maybe, I don't know, VS 2.3 or something like that. So we can get that. So I think this colonization meta game, that's when you are asking about survival, that's for me the priority. The other is NPCs, because we need to make the world feel more alive and also give you some reward and some challenges in the forms of NPCs. So I think NPCs will have big impact on survival. And then the contracts which serve serve as some kind of units of how you can progress somewhere, or like some package of, you know, like work that you can do and you can get rewarded for it. And again, it's just making it easier to understand, you know, that it's some package or some unit of something. And so when I think about survival, this is the main thing that I think about.
Because the final point I wanted to touch on with survival is that we didn't want to really limit players with one route on how to build and how to survive. So we've still given them some advanced tools in there, so they can, for instance, switch between using the backpack building ore system and then component system, so they can see what a block requires and needs. So if you are a more advanced builder and you want to check out the components that a block requires, you can do so, and it's as simple as just hitting a key and you can view it right away. The next big question that we have here for Marek is about the story and the direction of the story. Like, we want to know, first of all, why we have a story in Space Engineers 2. Why not just keep it like Space Engineers 1 and, you know, just have them do whatever they want?
I think the main reason is that I wanted to tell the story. And the second reason would be that I think stories will make the game and the world more believable, more interesting, and I mean, you can actually like trigger a lot of imagination and dreaming in people by telling some stories. And, you know, because there is a lot of that is not set in the story, and then people start thinking about it and so on. So if you want to give more rich experience, I think it's good to have stories and mysteries and open questions and cliffhangers and so on. So, but I think the main reason is that I simply wanted to have there the story.
Because would you say as well, having a story, contracts, and more support for players, you know, to actually give them something to do, gives them a reason to build as well?
Yes.
So if they're not as creative, would you think that was, you know, part of the idea as well? If you want to go into a little detail of maybe giving less creative players a reason to build something instead of, you know, getting them stuck at the start line?
Yes, exactly. And because usually it's some kind of driver that's driving you forward and telling you what to do, and so you don't need to think that much ahead or forward, and yeah, so that's the reason. But still, I think that if Almagist and Space Engineers 2 has story, it's simply much more richer experience, and also it's creating a shared experience situation where people will actually, you know, like if you do this right, and they will like the main characters, the factions, they will be talking about these, and because people need shared experiences.
So looking forward to the future, like how far are we going to expand the story? Is the story going to, you know, have an end game in sight? Because I know this is something that the players have always wondered for Space Engineering 1, you know, will we have something that'll end the experience, or, you know, end the game and then move us on to the sandbox? Yeah.
So, as I said, the colonization sandbox basically is one direction you can go, the story is another one, or you can go together, both of them. And the story will definitely have some kind of end point, you know, the story must end at some point, but the colonization ideally shouldn't end. So you can colonize Almagist until end of your life, basically, you know, because there will still be something more in it that you can colonize. So you will feel the sense of progressing in the colonization, but, you know, there is never the end. Or, you know, some areas can actually kind of revert in their colonization stage and so on. But the story definitely has an ending point, and it's a story about two brothers who arrived to Almagist on one of the colonization ships. They are the pilots, and so they were responsible for getting that ship there over 10,000 years. And but they come there, you know, there are some troubles, there are some mysteries, some things that nobody expected, you know, they are there, and they will have to go through it. There is also, and this is a big part of the story, is the relationship between the two brothers that will develop over time and until the end, and then people will see what happens. And yeah, I think that's the story is really important. But also one reason is that as I don't know, like not got older, but basically as I'm going through life, I understand people more and more, or I know more about how we people think, you know. And I also need it for my own survival, to be honest, because as a leader of the company, you really need to understand people, right? Yeah. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about like people motivations, why somebody is doing something, not doing something, and so on. So I got quite a lot entangled there. And now through this story, I actually want to talk about some of these things. And it's just somehow interesting.
Some real life experiences
Yes.
mixed into the story and narrative right there. But the story is going to be something incredible, and of course, since this is just the foundations, we're only introducing the start of the story. So they'll have a brief introduction, we'll show them how to play, and then they'll be introduced to the sandbox experience, but more story will come later on top of the contracts. So now I'm going to ask a really scary question. You know, why is multiplayer right at the end of the roadmap? Players have been asking, you know, why is it right at the end? Why can't they have it now?
Yeah, so I think the basic question is that if we change the order and start with multiplayer, then you would have a game, empty game with multiplayer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There would not be colonization, no survival, no this unified grid system, nothing. So, you know, who would play that, right? Like,
Yeah, of course.
So this is the main reason. And by the way, I think I wouldn't say that the multiplayer is at the end, because I think that after we do multiplayer, we'll have few polish milestones, you know, where we'll wrap up the story, wrap up the survival and colonization and everything. So, but by the way, we're also like speedrunning to multiplayer as fast as we can. So it's not that, you know, like we don't like multiplayer. But as I said, if you think about like the possible roadmaps that we have could be choosing, so one roadmap could be like, let's say, extremely multiplayer oriented, which would be that in January this year, instead of creative mode, we would release multiplayer. You know, so like you would have empty game where you can connect with some players. You cannot build nothing. Yeah. Maybe you would see the other players, but you know, why would you want to do that? So the other way to build the system first and then add multiplayer on top of it seemed like you know, more logical. And also, what we also want to do is that we want to do this small multiplayer or co-op multiplayer for players first, and because we want to give players the opportunity to play with their friends, even in smaller groups, as soon as we can. And the reason is that it's much easier for us to make this smaller multiplayer than the big one with dedicated servers and God knows how many players on the server, because of the optimizations. Because once you start scaling up number of players, you know, like new kind of problems emerge, and which you don't have if there is only 4 people inside.
Okay, there you go. So we do actually have another really difficult question for you to go on, and this is about NPCs. And NPCs is quite a wide term, but players really want to know how they'll fit into the future of colonization, exploration, the story. Like, what is an NPC in Space Engineers 2 to you, and how will we utilize them, if we can touch on that yet? Yeah.
So we are talking about the human NPCs, and they will make the world feel more alive, you know, not so empty. Because even in VS2, the contracts that you have there, they are, I don't know how to call it, maybe like a static experience, you know, it's like go somewhere, collect something, bring it somewhere, or like repair something, collect some ore, and it's not very dynamic. That doesn't feel very dynamic. So NPCs, I think, will add a lot of this dynamicism, and in the form of, you know, challenge, so you can have some combat with them, and so on. And that's the main thing. So you will meet them at stations, but you also will meet them in the contracts and encounters as enemies or just neutral people. And
because I think the main question they want to ask is, there going to be other characters running around that are not people, causing trouble and shooting at you and, you know, interacting with you, or are they just going to stand still at a station? That's, I think, what the idea.
So both. So you would meet them at the station, and you know, you can get some contract from them, or you can meet them. Let's say you go to do some contract. Let's say you have to take over some station, and there will be, you know, like 10 NPCs inside, and you will have to fight with them. So I don't want to, you know, talk too much about the specific use cases that the NPCs will do, because, you know, maybe we'll want to change something. But we did some experiments or prototypes a couple of years ago, where we tried to have NPCs that can pilot ships, or NPCs that can walk on grids, or let's say jump from one grid to another grid, or NPCs that they know that they are missing some resource and they actually go and collect the resource. But what I think we will not be doing some kind of, let's say like a long-term life for an NPC, if that makes sense. You know, so like NPC that is persistent, permanent, and living there for days and having his own or her own plan and some objectives and so on. So they will still be, you know, like NPCs in other games.
Okay. So some really exciting features there, both multiplayer and NPCs discussed. But I want to kind of bring this towards an end here. And I want to ask you is, you know, which part of the roadmap coming up are you looking forward to? Can you cover some of the features that you're really excited about, you know, when we get there?
Yeah. So I think I must say the water, and the reason is that I think it will be like absolutely huge addition to Space Engineers.
Of course.
Because it's a new element, it will give new engineering challenges, but also opportunities. And we also invested a lot of time to it, like I think 3-4 years or something like that. And you know, some work is still need to be done. So it's a big thing, also big risk, and we need closure. So that's why I think water is number one for me. The second one, I would say, this colonization system integrated with the story in a good way. Okay. That's really fun, and helping the experience. That's another big thing, or second one. And the third one, I would say, is the NPCs, because I think they will really expand. I don't know, the experience in the game quite a lot.
Okay. So to bring this to a closure, something that we discussed the other day and we were going into a little bit more detail is, you know, choosing the right time to pick up Space Engineers 2. Of course, VS2 might be the right milestone for you, where there is, you know, there's planets, there's the introduction of colonization, we've got the foundation of survival systems, but it might also not be the right time. But at the same time, it's a great way to support us. So by picking up Space Engineers 2, you're going to continue to support the development. Same with all the DLCs that we've been releasing for Space Engineers 1 as well. Is there anything you'd like to comment on that?
Yeah, I think you wrapped it nicely. I think, of course, as you said, like if this is not the right time for people to join the experience, they can do it later. But I also think that sooner they join and give us feedback, you know, it's better for us. And also it's more fun for us actually to be developing the game together with the players.
Exactly.
It's this shared experience, you know, basically players become part of the team, so yeah.
Because I think a lot of new players out there don't realise how valuable the feedback is, and when they get involved with our community, they, you know, jump on our support site, the feedback's taken in by our team, and then it's processed straight to the developers, and you know, your ideas are impacting gameplay, and like you said, we're almost building the game together, and it's affecting, you know, how or which direction we want to go in. Of course, there's a vision, and you know, that's something we want to stay focused on, but player feedback is critical. So make sure you drop yourself down in the comment section in this video and let us know how you feel. There's a lot of really exciting things that we've discussed today, and thank you, Marek, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, goodbye, guys.